Today's video is about how to recognise and treat altitude illnesses easily, and is part of a continuation of our altitude series. Hi, this is Joe Bonington from Joe's Basecamp, where we help people with the preparation, fitness and training for high altitude adventures and to get you back home safely, even if you've never been to altitude before. In my last video, I explained how to prevent altitude illnesses. But in this video, what I'm going to do is go into what altitude illnesses are, how to recognise them, and then how to treat them. Now, I better cue my disclaimer. This is purely for educational purposes only. I am not a doctor and this is not medical advice. Always seek the advice of your physician or a qualified medical practitioner. At the end of the day, your safety is your responsibility, and it's crucial that you do all the research and ask all the relevant people. Altitude sickness seems to be the number one concern of people going on high altitude treks or mountaineering adventures. For the vast majority of people, going to altitude and following the rules, there is never an issue. But if you don't know what you're doing, and if you don't know what to look out for, things could be very unpleasant and could go very wrong. And the worst outcomes of it can be so easily avoided if treated properly and promptly. One of the pieces of kit that we use to help us recognise altitude illnesses is a pulse oximeter. Now, as a bonus, at the end of this video, I'm actually going to run through how they actually work and what to do with them to get the most out of them. So make sure you stick around till the end. Now, if you want to learn about preventing altitude illnesses, and if you want your very own Lake Louise score sheet, which would be a great tool for you to have for your adventure, then I've popped a link in the description below to our complete guide to altitude illnesses. So go and grab that as well once you've finished watching this video. And hey, if you find this video helpful, make sure you like, share and subscribe to the channel as well, where there's plenty more of this to come. So first of all, let's get an understanding of what happens to your body when we go to altitude. So when you go to a higher altitude, your body encounters several challenges due to the lower oxygen levels and the reduced air pressure. So here's what happens from a physical perspective. So as you ascend to higher altitudes, the oxygen concentration in the air decreases. This is because the atmosphere contains a fixed amount of oxygen. But the higher up you go, the lower the air pressure. And the lower the air pressure, that means the availability of the oxygen molecules is more sparse. So when you're exposed to lower oxygen levels, your body experiences a condition called hypoxia. Hypoxia occurs when there's insufficient oxygen to sustain normal bodily functions, especially with the tissues and the internal organs. To compensate for the reduced oxygen in the air, the body reacts by breathing faster, trying to get more oxygen into the system, and this increases and elevates your breathing rate. The heart rate then goes up as the body tries to pump more oxygen-rich blood around the system to the oxygen-starved muscles and internal organs. And this is a way for the heart to try and maintain adequate oxygen delivery to the tissues. So over time, your body adapts to the altitude in a process that's called acclimatization. So one of the things that it does, because there's less oxygen in the air, it very cleverly starts to develop more red blood cells. These are the things that carry oxygen. So it's got more things to carry what oxygen there is around the system. Now your blood vessels, the capillaries, these actually expand so that it's actually easier to get this oxygen-rich blood around the system. Your body also gets better at utilising the oxygen in the air by starting to take deeper breaths, so that we're getting more air in so we can take in more of the thin oxygen in at any one time. So we increase our lungs efficiency. And now right at the other end, where the capillaries are delivering the oxygen to, our tissues actually get better and more efficient in taking up that oxygen as well. On top of that, your bodies produce a substance called erythropoietin. And this is the thing that actually stimulates the production of red blood cells that the body needs to move this oxygen around. So with all these benefits, you can see why professional athletes love their altitude training. So what are the consequences of not acclimatizing properly, of going up too quickly and not giving your body time to adjust? So we're going to look at all the altitude illnesses. The first one we're going to look at is known as AMS, acute mountain sickness, and it's the most common form of altitude illness. The body's organs can no longer function properly as the tissues are starved of oxygen. And now hypoxia is taking place and the brain starts to struggle. The brain is particularly sensitive to changes in oxygen levels. If it's not getting enough, this is when we can start to feel nausea and then we can start to vomit. We're also going to start feeling weakness and fatigue. This is because of a couple of things. So fatigue is both happening in the muscles, but then also the brain controls fatigue as well. And so as the brain is starved and the body is starved of oxygen, we're getting this double whammy. So we're really starting to feel weak, lethargic, etc. As the brain is no longer functioning properly, the brain controls things like balance and coordination, and so we can start to feel dizzy, we can start to feel out of kilter and unsteady on our feet. All of these above symptoms, these are basic altitude mountain sickness. But if these get worse, then we can be leading into the two more serious conditions, which are HAPE and HACE. And that is high altitude pulmonary edema and high altitude cerebral edema. Let's start with HAPE first. High altitude pulmonary edema is a potentially life-threatening condition. HAPE occurs because of the body's reaction to being at altitude and how it affects the blood vessels, particularly around the lungs. So to make up for the reduced oxygen, what the body tries to do is it constricts the pulmonary arteries. This is a condition known as hypoxic pulmonary vasoconstriction, or HPV. This mechanism redirects blood from poorly oxygenated areas of the lungs to more oxygenated areas of the lungs. Now, whilst this is a normal response, what it can do is lead to increased pulmonary arterial pressure. So as the pressure in these arteries increases significantly, this starts to force fluid from the surrounding capillaries into the little alveoli, the air sacs that make up the lung. And this in turn causes the tiny blood vessels in the alveoli to become leaky. And now things are starting to get bad, because what's happening now is we're now getting decreased oxygen as all these air sacs are now filled with fluid and none of the oxygen can get in, decreasing the oxygen levels in the blood system even further. And so this all just has a knock-on and roundabout effect that spirals downwards. So the classic symptoms of HAPE are, so one, we've got increased rate of breathing, increased heart rate, we've got fatigue and weakness, we've got a cough and rattling in the chest and bringing up a kind of pink frothy sputum, a tightness and discomfort in the chest, and sometimes an almost feeling like you're drowning, especially when lying down. So next, let's talk about HACE, or high altitude cerebral edema. And this is basically fluid on the brain. So with HAPE and HACE, they're both about fluid. But this time it's about the body handling it in very different ways. So with HAPE, we had a constriction of the arteries. But with HACE, what happens is that the brain is the most vital organ. And so the brain wants to really try and keep as much oxygen there as it possibly can. So whilst it's shutting down other parts of the body, it's actually expanding the vessels, the blood capillaries in the brain to try and let more oxygen in. But this can have problems. So the process is called vasodilation. And as we get up to high altitudes, it happens too much. So we get too much blood going to the brain, and then this is now causing pressure in the brain. Just like with the HAPE, we were getting pressure in the lungs. What starts to happen, there starts to be pressure on the blood-brain barrier, and so we get blood leaking from the capillaries into the brain. And this is the part that's known as cerebral edema. It's this leaking of fluids from the capillaries through the blood-brain barrier and into the brain itself, causing the brain to swell. And then this starts to interfere and disrupt all our normal neurological functions. So the common symptoms include basically all the symptoms of AMS, the nausea and vomiting and all of that kind of stuff. But then also on top of that, we have confusion, we have disorientation, we have altered mental states such as aggression, we have difficulty walking, we have sensitivity to light, we have hallucinations, and in the very worst cases, we have full loss of consciousness. Now, these all reflect the fact that it's all neurological stuff that's going on, and these really need to be dealt with really quickly. Haze and hate are real medical emergencies, and if not treated properly and promptly, they can lead to death. So what I want to do now, I want to quickly take you through a 4-tier system that I use for categorizing symptoms so that you can easily see where they are and whether you are fine and you're just at altitude and the things are going on that happen when you're at altitude but acclimatizing normally, and then the things that aren't, okay? It's a 4-part process. Now, I always use this in conjunction with using a Lake Louise score sheet. And just to let you know, we've got a Lake Louise score sheet attached to the Complete Guide to Altitude Illness, which is free for you, and that is in the links in the description below. Can I just remind you as well at this point that I am not a doctor. You do need to go and seek medical advice from a qualified medical professional. This is educational purposes only. The 4 categories that I've got, I've given them colours. We've got blue, we've got green, we've got amber, and we've got red. And the first category that we're going to look at is blue. Now, blue is just the most common thing that people complain about at altitude, and that is a headache. Headaches are normal to get above 2,500 meters. And with that, the first thing to do is you're just adjusting to the altitude. There's no need to worry. Keep walking, rest when you need to rest, and drink some water and see whether it goes away. Most of the time it's because we're dehydrated. There's less water in the atmosphere at altitude, and because of your increased respiration rate, you're losing fluids quicker as well. So the first one is green, and that's just that mild headache, and it tends to just settle down and go. It comes and goes over the first couple of days. You might want to take a Nurofen or something like that and just monitor it, okay? Live with it. And on your Lake Louise score sheet, this would basically be 1 mark. So the level 2 symptoms are what I call green. I'll be honest, this is basically mild AMS, but it is not anything to worry about, okay? It is it in its mildest form, and this is the body saying, I've arrived at altitude, I need to get used to being here, okay? Now, if you follow all the rules, and if you go through the rules in the prevention video that I've put a link to down below, it shouldn't be an issue. And the green symptoms are, as well as your headache that you had before, these now include difficulty sleeping, a slight breathlessness on activity, and a higher than normal heart rate. With these symptoms, everybody gets them, or almost everybody gets them. I certainly do get them, and it's just a given. It's part of being at altitude. Drink more fluids. Half the time your headache will go away. Just take your time, go steady, make note on your Lake Louise sheet of what symptoms that you've got, and then also take a paracetamol as well. Take an NSAID. That does relieve the milder symptoms of AMS. And it really is nothing to worry about. It's just something to be aware of. There's a difference between worrying about something and being aware of something. Don't panic. You're doing fine. And according to a Lake Louise score sheet, even at the most you could have now is 2 points. It's basically still just a situation of being watch, look, be aware, drink lots of fluids, maybe take a paracetamol or an NSAID or something like that, seeing if the symptoms reduce. Take it steady, take it easy, and follow the rules. So now we've got the level 3 symptoms, amber. Okay, if we've got to this stage, then we have actually tipped over a line. So these symptoms really actually are a potential threat to your journey and to your trek. Things actually start to change here, and we start to treat these in a slightly different way, because these are things that, if left unchecked, could actually have far more serious consequences. The level 3 amber symptoms are these. It's a loss of appetite, it's nausea, possibly with some vomiting, it is weakness, it is dizziness and lightheadedness, and it's an ongoing fatigue and malaise. So this is where you've actually gone beyond mild AMS and you're now at moderate AMS. And if you've got any of these symptoms, it's now time that you do actually have to take action. So with the amber levels, it's split. If I'm at the mild stage, or the milder end of these, but I've still hit those 3 points of the Lake Louise sheet, I will just I will stop ascending for a start, and I will just stay at the same place for the next 24 hours. So I will spend 2 nights at one level without ascending any further. Now, hopefully that will give my body time to catch up. And then also, if I haven't started taking any Diamox, I actually might consider taking Diamox at this stage as well, because the Diamox actually helps your body with the acclimatization process. Remember, it is a prophylactic, it's a preventative, it is not a treatment. So I'm not using this as a treatment, I'm actually just using this as a trying to help my body with the acclimatization process. But if I've got them slightly more severely, maybe my vomiting's a bit more severe, maybe I'm feeling pretty rotten, I might consider dropping down 300 to 500 meters or 1,000 to 1,500 feet for the Americans out there, so that I can then reacclimatize at a lower level. And same thing, I'd stay there for 2 nights and reassess. I wouldn't automatically come back up, I'd reassess at where I am on my Lake Louise score sheet before then trying to ascend again. Now, please note as well, if you or somebody with you does decide to descend because they're lightheaded and dizzy, I hope I shouldn't have to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Do make sure that they don't go down alone, okay? It might not be because your AMS would get any worse on the way down, though it could. You're dizzy and lightheaded. You don't want to have a fall and a cracked head on top of all your other woes at the moment. So make sure that you take somebody else with you. Level 4, code red, and it's code red for a reason. This is severe AMS, possibly HAPE or HACE. All the symptoms now need immediate attention and action. This is where there's life-threatening conditions going on. Let's have a quick reminder of the category 4 symptoms, and let's start with HAPE. Any changes in behaviour, shortness of breath at rest, wheezing or gasping for air on exercise, tightness or congestion in the chest, abnormal sounds in the chest cavity when breathing, feelings of suffocation and drowning, and a cough that produces a pink frothy sputum. And the symptoms of HACE, again, any change in normal behaviour, confusion and slurred speech, nausea and vomiting, cold and clammy skin, delusional or aggressive behaviour, sensitivity to light, extreme fatigue, loss of coordination, inability to sit upright or even to move, loss of the ability to talk, unconsciousness. So these conditions, they as you can see here from the symptoms, they're interchangeable, and you don't have one necessarily at the exclusion of the other. You can end up getting both at the same time. Don't ascend any further under any circumstances. This person needs to be evacuated. We need to get them down the mountain as fast as we can by the best means available. So that might be a helicopter, if there's no helicopters available, by a horse. And in the meantime, utilise things like available oxygen, a gammo bag if there's one available. This person needs qualified medical attention urgently. Also, do not leave this person alone either. They need somebody with them all the time. So whilst you're waiting for your chopper, maybe get them into a gammo bag if you've got one available. Start pumping on that. Don't give them any medications unless you've got a qualified professional with you. The key at this point is just get this person down as quickly as you can. And you'll be amazed, once somebody has gone down and is back down to non-high altitude levels, so flown back to Kathmandu, the speed of recovery from being near at death's door to being up and about is quite amazing to see. Anyway, so that is the 4 levels. We've got code blue, just a mild headache, nothing to worry about. We've got code green, that is the mild headache, maybe a little bit of breathlessness, but you're still okay and you're still scoring under on the Lake Louise score sheet. Code amber, you need to either stay where you're at or you need to go down. Code red, you've got to get down as soon as you possibly can. I've got a question for you that I'd like you to answer in the comments. Are you on your next trip considering using Diamox? Let me know below. If you're somebody who has been to altitude before, did you use Diamox? And if you didn't, why didn't you use Diamox? I'd like to hear your thoughts. Okay, time for that bonus. So, really good bit of kit, and that is a pulse oximeter. Nowadays, pulse oximeters are really easy to get. You can get them on Amazon, eBay. Just be careful of the ones you get. Some of them can be a bit ropey and fail quite quickly, but I'll put a link to a decent one below. So what a pulse oximeter does, it measures the levels of oxygen in the arterial blood, and it's usually taken on the end of a finger. And this is expressed as what they call SpO2. Now, your SpO2 levels have a tendency to decrease as you go up to altitude. And significant drops in your SpO2 can be a precursor or a sign of not adapting to altitude properly. Several studies have demonstrated the correlation between lower SpO2 levels and the onset of AMS symptoms. If you're in a remote area and say you haven't got access to a medical professional or to a doctor, it can just help give you that peace of mind, and you use it alongside your Lake Louise sheet. It just gives you some great extra information. And so this ends up just being a valuable early warning system. And now most trek leaders carry a pulse oximeter with them in their medical kit and will test the oxygen saturation levels of their clients all the way up on the mountain. Now do remember, we're all individuals. Now people do respond to altitude very differently, and that includes in the SpO2 levels as well. So you can actually have some people tracking with a lower SpO2 level and somebody with a higher, and the somebody with the higher is feeling more awful than the somebody with the lower. And that just shows the individuality of this situation. So what we look for with the SpO2 isn't so much where we're at, but the drops. So it's actually, you're looking for sudden drops in oxygen saturation, and more of an indicator than say a steady decline as your altitude is going up. The other thing that the SpO2 levels do is give you, if it does go dangerously low, then it's giving you an idea about the fact that you may need an evacuation, or you may need other treatments like going into a gamma bag, oxygen therapy, etc. So let's look at some O2 levels. So down here at sea level, most people are sitting anywhere between 98 and 100% virtually all of the time, unless you're exercising heavily or doing something that is restricting the amount of oxygen that's getting into the system. But when we get up to 4,000 meters, then your oxygen levels could drop down to 85 or 90%. So at 4,500 meters, you're looking at 80 to 85% oxygen saturation. At around 5,000 meters, your SpO2 levels are ranging from about 75% to 80%. So at 5,500 meters, for some individuals, your SpO2 can fall below 75%. So at this level, monitor your SpO2 levels regularly. You are now in a very challenging environment. If this video has helped you to understand more about altitude and what you need to do in altitude environments, it might help somebody else as well. So please do share this video and like it as well, so that the algorithm then shows it out to more people. And if you can subscribe as well, it really helps this channel move forward. Don't forget to grab your Lake Louise score sheet. That's down below in the complete guide to altitude illnesses. Use that in conjunction with your pulse oximeter and have a safe and awesome journey. And do remember, I'm not a doctor. This is not medical advice, education purposes only. Do your own research, stay safe.